Good afternoon to you. Before you tell us what's happening there and what we're expecting, what we do know is that the President is meeting with the diplomatic corps, but just put us in the picture in terms of why specifically the diplomatic corps. What's the significance behind this?
All right, well, a very good afternoon to you and our viewers at home. Indeed, the President is meeting the diplomatic corps here. You will know that Pretoria is the second largest diplomatic community outside of Washington, and we have majority of African states represented here in Pretoria. But not only that, the dean of the diplomatic community comes from Africa himself. That is the DRC. That is Ambassador Ben Mpoko. He is an African, and so this is part of South Africa trying to build better communication and better integration with the rest of the continent, and also promoting unity and the sense of us being one Africa. That is the theme that they're saying, that's the theme saying building a better Africa and a better world. That's the theme for this Africa Month here, and the President, of course, is here to advance those ideas of bringing unity in Africa. You will know that South Africa has had problems in the past, being seen mostly as a stepchild of the African continent. We've had those xenophobic attacks, which really, compromise relations with other African nations. I would think that South Africa strongly celebrating this through the Department of Arts and Culture speaks to that idea of building a united Africa, and of course presenting South Africa as a truly African country. Natasha,
we've seen some significant changes across the continent in terms of leadership, and we know that there are important elections coming up for a few African countries in the next few months, including ourselves next year. So are there representatives there today from other countries that will perhaps be engaging with the President on various issues facing the continent?
Indeed, the DRC has elections. We know that Zimbabwe will be having elections. So there are a variety of countries you mentioned there, and they will be engaging, one would expect, with the President regarding that, sharing electoral ideas and making sure that elections are free and safe. Often with African elections, they tend to be violent. We've seen that some few years in Zimbabwe. But certainly under a new leadership there, you would expect that they're trying to go on a different path, and a path of peaceful and free and fair elections. And South Africa as a whole is being very involved, particularly in SADC. We've seen President Ramaphosa, when he was a deputy, getting involved in Lesotho issues there, trying to facilitate political stability. We've seen South Africa playing a role in South Sudan, Sudan itself as well. So South Africa has been a country that's presenting itself as a mediator and as a leader within Africa, and certainly playing a big role. And we know, of course, that the minister in the presidency, that is Dr. Dlamini Nkosazana Zuma, was also the chairperson of the AU. So South Africa has a big role to play in the continent. I think by inviting this diplomatic community is continuing that and just celebrating being African, and also, taking this role as a leader within Africa, a leader that can provide leadership and also assistance, particularly when it comes to elections. Certainly in South Africa, we have a good track record when it comes to elections. We've had largely free and fair elections, so we're sort of leaders in that regard, and I think a lot of African countries have a lot to learn from us, and they will be getting that sort of advice from the President here.
Absolutely. Sipho, before I let you go, just give us a sense of the program for today. Are we going to hear from the President today?
Well, indeed, we haven't, as you can see, we're just still outside here, the Presidential Guest House. And if you can see, there's a number of vehicles that are making their way there. Those are the guests, those are the ambassadors that are making their way. The event is expected to get underway at 1 o'clock, and we expect the President, of course, to represent. I mentioned to you that the DRC ambassador, that is Ben Mpoko, is the dean of the diplomatic corps. Of course, he will also be addressing, he often addresses these type of gatherings. He will be also addressing us, and we will see who else comes in. But certainly the theme today is that of promoting African unity. But what's also interesting is that they didn't just invite African nations only, they invited all the diplomatic corps here, and which means it's a very inclusive event to showcase what Africa has, not just to Africans themselves, but also to other nations, so they can tell good stories about us, I suppose. But certainly this is about promoting Africanism and just building those relationships and building a united Africa, with South Africa playing a key role as a leader in resolving conflicts in the continent, a leader that assists in terms of elections. We saw our former president President Mbeki also playing a big role in the Kenya elections recently. So certainly South Africa has a history of of playing big roles on the continent, and I think that is where today's event is a continuation of that theme, that South Africa is a truly African country and it's there to support its African nations.
Sipho, thank you very much. Sipho Stuurman live for us from outside the presidential guest house in Pretoria, where we are expecting to hear from the president a bit later today. Well, South Africa will know in